Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our ongoing series that looks beyond the headlines to uncover what is really happening in Rwanda. I am your host, Denise Zaneza, and it is always an honor to guide you through these vital conversations. Today, we dive deep into the harsh realities of life under Paul Kagame's regime, a dictatorship often portrayed as a democratic success story thanks to a powerful and costly PR machine. But behind the polished image lies a very different truth, one marked by human rights violations, political oppression, and a complete shutdown of freedoms we too often take for granted. In Rwanda today, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of expression are non existent. Voices of dissent are met with harsh punishment, from imprisonment and torture to tragically targeted killings. Journalists who dare to challenge the regime's narrative face the gravest risks. To help us unpack this, I'm joined by Samuel Baker Byansi, a journalist and a writer whose deep knowledge and courageous voice bring essential insight to this conversation. Hello, Baker. Welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Baker, let's start with your journey. What first sparked your interest in journalism, and was there a particular moment or story that made you say, this is what I need to do?
Yeah, I think as any other Rwandan or kid growing up, you have passions of what you want to be, and a lot come through your face. So I grew up in a post-genocide society in Rwanda, and I followed a lot of the Gacaca courts and also learning more about the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. And through the process, I realized a lot happened and the media played a bigger role. So the media did not play on a bigger role in influencing what happened in the 1994 genocide, but also it is through media that we learned about what happened in the genocide. So I felt like there is a need to really understand the role of telling stories and understanding stories from the true perspective. And yeah, when I continued studying and also growing up in a society where, of course, listening to radios was not easy in that Rwanda of 2000. And few people really had access to media outlets. And, people could talk about what is on the radio stations or what they said on radio stations. And I felt like I need to be there. Also, people need to listen to me. And I need to tell these stories. So as I grew up, my interest in media studies went on growing, and I went for trainings from different institutes, including UMCAT, and later joined platforms like African Censored, where I really got the passion of doing investigative journalism, and also learned from those guys how to tell these stories and why it matters. Yeah, through a lot of collaborations with the help of a lot of colleagues from Uganda and Kenya and Nigeria, I ended up part of the group telling this story from an investigative point of view.
Right. That's a remarkable journey. And first of all, congratulations on receiving the 2025 Difference Day honorary title for freedom of expression, a well-deserved recognition of your commitment to truth and justice, really. I believe it was awarded by the VUB in Brussels.
Yeah.
And so, well done. Just for our audience, maybe a small thing that I can add is that this recognition is a reminder of the global importance of defending freedom of expression, especially in places where it is at most at risk, like in Rwanda. So, Baker, from your own experience, what does it look like for journalists working independently inside Rwanda?
Yeah, as I said, it was during the years after the genocide, and growing up, I was in a country, and I saw a country where information was weaponized.
Mm,
Uh, there were things everyone knew about no one, but no one could say it loudly. So personally, I began to understand the cost of silence and power of telling the truth. One turning point, as I said, was from those colleagues I met and learned from them. So implementing this in the Rwandan society becomes very expensive, and this brings me to the cost. Or from my experience, what does it mean or look like working independently inside the Rwanda? So
mhm,
from that background and also learning from other colleagues, I come in this country. I want to practice because it's my country and tell these stories independently. I would say that independence doesn't really exist in the way people imagine in Rwanda.
mhm.
You are watched, followed, and often called in for questioning after publishing something, even slightly critical, even if it's a tweet. So most independent journalists either get co-opted,
Mhm.
go silent, or decide to flee the country, as myself. There is constant surveillance and manipulation. Editors often receive calls from state securities before they even finish layouts. And
Mhm.
if you report on something sensitive, like, for example, the 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 Kagame's army operations in DRC, or like Kagame's inner cycle or cross-border killings, you
Yes.
are treated like a criminal, not just as a journalist. It's in short, you can just call it journalism under siege. That's what I can say about that.
That is a very powerful statement. Journalism under siege. It's really deeply troubling to hear how being a journalist in Rwanda means being criminalized for just doing your job, especially when reporting, like you said, on topics like Kagame's army operations or political power structures. And what is also frustrating is that also those who are outside Rwanda who try to speak up, and we are immediately met with aggressive online pushback by individuals who call themselves Inore. And they appear like almost instantly after you post anything critical or you demand explanation from the government. And they accuse you of lying, of being a genocidaire, and so many tactics that they use just to drown out the truth. But you, Baker, you lived through all of this. You didn't just observe it from afar. You endured the fear, the surveillance, and the consequences. And my question for you now is when you look back how journalism has evolved under different Rwanda regimes, do you see patterns? Like, has operation changed in form, or is it just continuity actually of what was already there?
Yeah. Um, the partner is repression. What changes is the method. Under Habyarimana government, control was top-down but less sophisticated. Under Kagame's regime, it is high-tech, embedded, and global in a way. The state doesn't just control domestic narrative,
Mm-hmm.
it policies the diaspora, manipulates social media, and recruits journalists into its propaganda networks. So,
Mm-hmm.
over the years, the Kagame regime has mastered the appearance of media freedom uh, and press conferences, media laws, journalist associations, but these are often tools to control, not signs of openness. So yes, the tactic have shifted, but the goal has stayed the same. Suppress suppress the dissent and manipulate consent.
Mm-hmm.
And these have been achieved through different strategies that the government have put in place, including controlling the Rwanda Media Commission, including putting journalism under RGB, yet it could, in actual sense, it could be self-regulatory. So we needed to be a little bit independent from the government. But now, in paperwork, it's like Rwandan media is regulate itself through the Rwanda Media Commission, but in reality, the government regulates the media
Mm-hmm.
through all channels that connect to Rwanda Media Commission. So you find that the Rwanda Media Commission is under RGB, RGB is under Ministry of Local Government, and it's the RGB that pay even the leaders of this Rwanda Media Commission. So it is always difficult for the Rwanda Media Commission to really stand up for journalists and to defend journalists. And this have helped the government to control what the media do and how it survive. So
Mm-hmm.
the Rwandan media, of course, have a lot of problems, including lack of enough finances to run media platforms, and the government used that very clearly in its uh, benefit, because this is how the government managed to control the journalists,
Yes.
and also putting in consideration that the private sector in Rwanda is also very poor. So the government is the overall employer in the whole country. So here, when you are independent, or you cannot have an independent media industry when you don't have an independent private sector, because the independent private sector forms up a strong independent media industry.
Globally, also, wherever there's a dictatorship, it's almost automatically that they put in place some type of control over the media because it's so vital for the regime to survive.
Yeah, we have seen that actually. I don't know if you saw the recent Reporter Without Borders press index, where Rwanda
Yes, oh
moved
yes, yes.
uh, down again from 144 to 146. That's 2 places down in an index which is out of 180 countries. So we are still going down day by day. So because the government increases its control on the media industry with an intention of controlling the information and the narrative the people takes in. So when
Mm.
people, of course, consume propaganda, they make uninformed decisions. And this is where the government want Rwandans to stand at this point, because the government itself have violated their rights, but they keep silenced because they don't get the right information from the media industry. So I think that's what motivates the government to control the media, to make sure that Rwandans in Rwanda don't really know exactly what is happening in all sectors, because that helps them keeping Rwandans uninformed, and also using all different strategies they have in place, like manipulation of social platforms and using of PR firms globally to manipulate
Mhm.
their image globally, and make sure at least they remain with that global image, which show that the Rwandan government have succeeded in different sectors. But I always ask that when you are talking about Rwanda's success, always ask yourself whose success. And when you talk about the clean streets of Kigali, always ask yourself about at what cost, whose cost. So when I look at what cost myself, I look at like people of Vanyahe who were moved without compensation. I look at people that were killed in the process. I look at people that were raped in the process. I look at people that are in jail just for their own properties. So that's the cost some people are paying for these roads people admire. So I think by looking at that, you will understand that the regime have a huge responsibility in violating human rights of Rwandans, and the media industry have a big role in documenting and telling these stories to help the population understand what is going on in the country and also make the clean and clear decisions. But now, without proper local media industry and with international medias collaborating with the regime, with public relation firms collaborating with the regime to whitewash their crimes, with huge clubs like Arsenal, PSG, and all these clubs they are working with. I think one in Germany and another one
Bayern
also
Munich, yeah.
Bayern Munich, yeah, and Atletico Madrid, with all these teams coming together to really clean Kagame's image, it becomes hard for stories of ordinary Rwandans to be told globally. But still, we are here as journalists, and that's our role. And we do our part to tell these stories for the world to know that besides all this PR work Kagame have deployed globally, locally and globally, still, we Rwandans are still able and understanding to tell these stories ourselves and make sure our stories are heard as they are, not as someone else wants them to look like.
Yes, indeed. And thank you for being part of the ones who dare to speak out. There comes a danger with it. I think that is an understatement. But it's very vital and it's very important for the future of Rwanda that people don't stay silent, especially journalists like yourself and human rights activists all over the globe who are trying to show the reality of how things really are in Rwanda and how the government operates to oppress the population, whether they are in Rwanda or abroad. There's no limit when it comes to the Rwandan government. They go beyond the borders of Rwanda. Nothing scares them, and as long as they want something, they will go after it, no matter what, no matter who dies. They don't care. Just to talk about a bit about what we were saying about uh, the journalists in Rwanda. There's this silent violence, that suffocates them. Have you had to deal with that when you were still in Rwanda?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It's in the things you can't prove but feel every day. It's knowing that your phones or your laptops are being tapped. It's
Mm-hmm.
losing friends after publishing a story, yeah, and even families. It's walking up to find your name trending on Twitter with fake allegations,
That
or
happens a lot, indeed.
yeah, or learning that someone want your family to distance themselves from you. So silent violence is the pressure that builds without leaving bruises. It silences not by force,
Mm-hmm.
but by fear. And it works. Many brilliant journalists stop writing, not because they have run out of stories, but because the costs have become too high for them to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Rwandan journalists have been in this category. So yeah, I have been dealing with this for a couple of years, but again, sometimes I personally believe that journalism is a calling. In Chinyarwanda, we call it umuhamagaro. So you cannot easily quit. Sometimes you want to quit. All the surroundings are forcing you to quit, but still you feel like you have a responsibility to play in your society. And with this, personally, I have kept on moving, but the cost is very expensive. Of course, I have cut off a lot of family relations with my families. I have lived life I did not expect to live, and overall, I left my country, which matters a lot to me as a Rwandan, and that's why even far miles away from Rwanda, I can still stand to defend the rights in my country because I don't feel like this is something I need to lose. But for friends, families, relationships, social life, you lose everything, but
Mm.
still, you can't actually see this, as I said. It's something you live with every day, but you cannot easily even prove that you live with it. Yeah, that's what I can talk about that.
It's very difficult to find words after what you just said. Like everything that journalists who try to act in an independent way have to face in the country, in Rwanda, by the regime, the Rwandan government. But let's hope that, as you said, Umuhamagaro, your calling, will take you other places. And I mean, they say that it doesn't matter how long you live. What matters is what you leave behind. And up to now, I can say that you have built a legacy not only for yourself but also for your family. So keep going. And one thing that is also rarely gets talked about is self-censorship. You know, we just talked about the silent violence that comes from the government, but there's also self-censorship. How deep has fear dripped into newsrooms and editorial decisions in Rwanda? Are there topics that are just completely off limits, even if the government doesn't say anything?
Yeah, self-censorship. Uh, Personally, I believe, as someone who worked in different newsrooms in Rwanda for a couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
that it is embedded in the culture of the newsrooms. So many don't even see it as censorship anymore. It's just a routine. Like people have normalized it. So you don't touch certain topics. You know that as a journalist. So military operations in DRC is one of example of a topic you cannot easily talk about. Political assassinations are topics you cannot even talk about. Corruption at the top in the RPF and senior officials in the government, you cannot easily talk about that. Kagame's family, which is the first family, you cannot easily talk about that. Or the intelligence services, you cannot talk about what they are doing, even if it is wrong. So editors will just tell you as a journalist, without saying it directly, that the story
Mm-hmm.
might have problems. And sometimes journalists censor themselves before anyone even asks them to do so. The fear is so widespread that red lines become internalized. It's not just what you publish, it's what you need. You never there to start. I hope you understand that. So
Yeah.
it means that when it's not that I write a story, I give it to my editor, and my editor scrap it because of self-censorship. But it's that I don't even have to think about this story. If it's a
You know
political
it from
assassination,
yourself that
I
you don't.
don't even have to do this. So self-censorship have reached that stage in Rwanda newsroom that people have normalized it. And now when some stories don't even go beyond your thinking capacity, you have to just stop there and start another story. You don't have to share it with others to get to understand their understanding about it. You just stop from there. So that's a very, very, very huge challenge the Rwandan media is actually facing for now.
Yeah. And I also noticed that a lot of journalists in Rwanda only talk about entertainment.
It is easy to really survive on entertainment and sports main of the time. But now, at the topics I have just told you about, you don't even think about them, because if you think about them and you provide that story idea to your editor is going to just forward that story to the intelligence. Or and
Mm.
this journalist is trying to do this, A, B, C, D, and this will cost you a lot. So sometimes we don't even discuss about this. If you have like your colleague, a friend, you just discuss this behind the scene of the editorial meetings. And now sometimes when I was still in Rwanda, we used to decide that this story, we cannot tell it to the editor, but you can give it to the BBC. We can give it to other media platforms that can take it off. And when you give this story, you distance yourself from this story. You are like, I'm not part of it. I don't know anything about it. I have just gave you the story. I have the information, but I don't have the capacity to publish it because it is very costly. So there is a lot of stories that were told by different international medias, which I provided, and I refused deliberately to participate because if I did so in Rwanda, I wouldn't
would
be
have been
allowed.
your end.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
that's a story for many journalists in Rwanda, including now. There is a lot of Rwandan journalists in Rwanda who still do that because they cannot tell these stories themselves, so they share. Luckily enough, some of them share the stories to me, myself, or share to other media platforms. But I know a lot of journalists are doing that.
Yes, in order to survive. And
We still have good journalists in Rwanda.
yes, I
Despite
believe
all
I
the
believe
challenge.
there are also good journalists in Rwanda right now, but indeed, if you look at the climate around them, the oppression around them, they have to do what they do to survive. You even see some of them, we will not name names, but who spend their time insulting anyone who dares to speak about what is going on in Rwanda, and then you think, this is a respectable journalist. Why is he or she doing this? But now that you have highlighted everything that goes on behind the scenes, that most of us don't know, it's kind of understandable why they do it. It's not
Yeah,
something I would encourage them to do, but
you
it
really,
puts
you
everything
really,
into perspective, I
yeah,
would
you
say.
really don't need to blame a lot of them because it is very huge costly if they don't do what they do. Sometimes I don't blame my former colleagues in Rwanda, even when they attack my personality, when they do character assassination on my image on social platform, because I know what it means. Like you don't have your liberty to do it. In my
It's a survivor tactic.
survival tactic. In my book, I quote a meeting I had with the former police spokesperson, that's John Bosco Kabera, and the police intelligence chief, Ruzigamanzi Ejide, where he told me openly, it's either you are with us or against us. You cannot be independent. You have to be this side or this side. So I don't blame a lot of journalists because I know they're in the same position as I was a couple of years ago. And I believe a certain point of time when they are independent, when they have this protection for what can happen if they tell their stories, see a lot of them changing their mind and they start to speak freely about certain topics which they wouldn't do when they're in Rwanda. Actually, that often comes back much on even my social platform because previously I used to balance and try to be to deal with these people in a manner that I can survive myself. And
Yes.
now I personally try to be more truthful than being neutral. And I believe as journalism is a science of fact, being truthful is more useful for our society than being neutral because neutral actually help the oppressor, not the oppressed society.
That is very true. And by the way, for those who are listening, your book is called From Watchdog to Traitors. So everybody who hasn't got his or her copy yet, please get one. Where can they find the book,
Yeah,
Baker?
you can easily get the book on Amazon. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
or Kindle version. It's also available, and also for people in the Eastern African region, they can get the book from the Nuria bookstores. That's in Nairobi. They deliver books anywhere, even globally. So I have colleagues, friends in Canada that have been buying books from Nuria in Kenya, and it reaches them easily and better. So that's where you can easily find it now.
All right.
Yeah,
Perfect. I'll make sure I put a link in the description of our conversation.
sure.
Um, Well, Baker, we could go on for hours and hours since there's so much to uncover when it comes to today's topic. But unfortunately, time is not on our side, and we need to move forward to the end of this interesting conversation. Um, but before we do, I would like us to address the way the law operates in Rwanda. Because normally, in a country where separation of power is the norm, we see laws that protect journalists, but this is not the case in Rwanda. How come?
Yeah, because separation of power is a myth under authoritarian systems, which Rwanda belongs to. So in Rwanda, the judiciary isn't independent. It's part of the machinery. And laws that claim to protect journalists are often the very one used to jail them. So accusation like divisionism, spread of false information, or inciting insurrection are vague and weaponized. Parliament, the courts, even the National Human Rights Commission, they all reinforce the regime's control. There is no institutional protection for journalists. What exists is a climate of fear wrapped in legal language. Personally, I petitioned the Rwandan Supreme Court 2 times on laws that hinder press freedom. One was scrapped, but still I appealed in the East African Court of Justice because the laws are very vague and they can easily arrest anyone anywhere when they want it. So it is really the biggest problem we have, if I may say.
Yes, I agree totally with you. I even wrote an article about this called Beneath the Facade of Consensus Democracy in Rwanda. There is no separation of power, and like many Rwandans know, Rwanda claims to operate under consensus democracy, but this is really a mechanism for suppressing dissent and maintaining the ruling party's grip on power. And this must change because this cannot go on. I mean, like nothing lasts forever when you are oppressing a whole population like this. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I want to give you the final word. If you could speak directly to journalists in Rwanda right now, those who are still in the country, and also those who were forced into exile, what would you tell them?
That's a very huge one. To my colleagues, fellow journalists inside Rwanda, I see you. I know what it's like to feel concerned. You are not invisible, and your work still matters. Protect yourself, but don't give up on the truth. Even small acts, preserving documents, recording testimony, building quiet networks can make a huge difference. For colleagues, journalists who are in exile, I know a couple of them, you haven't failed. Distance is painful, but it's also power, and we have to use it. You have the freedom to say what others cannot in the country. Use it. Document what's happening in our country. Let us stand for our country. Let us not give up on our country. Support those still inside the country. Let us tell their stories anonymously, support them, and also protect their identity such that they can survive in the same system we have lived and managed to survive. Memory is resistance, and so is your voice as colleagues. So I think that's what I can tell my fellow colleagues, journalists in Rwanda and abroad.
What a wonderful way to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Baker, for being here.
Sure. Thank you for the space. Journalism in Rwanda is a dangerous, yes, but it is necessary. If we stop telling the truth, the silence becomes permanent. And silence is exactly what authoritarian regimes like Kagame's regime want.
Thank you so much. And as we said earlier, neutrality only helps the oppressor and not the oppressed. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today. And a heartfelt thank you once again to our incredible guest, Samuel Baker Byansi, for sharing not just his knowledge, but his courage and lived experience. These conversations are not easy, but they are necessary. They remind us that behind every silenced voice, there are countless others watching, waiting, hoping, and acting for change. And as we say in Kinyarwanda, Imana ifasha uwifashije. God helps those who help themselves. Let that be a call to action for all of us. If you believe in democracy, in dignity, in the rule of law, then now is not the time to look away. Reject complicity through silence, raise your voice, speak truth to power, stand in solidarity with those who cannot speak freely. Until next time, take care and thank you all for listening.